I'm joined now by Dylan Asafo, who is lecturer at the University of Auckland Law School, specialising in human rights in the Pacific and issues of racial justice. Dylan, thank you so much for making the time for us. This ceremony started about half an hour ago. What's happened so far and what are you expecting?
So within the first 5 minutes of the apology, we see that Prime Minister Ardern has undertaken a cultural apology, a culturally appropriate apology by the name of iwhonga, which involves the person who has done wrong sitting beneath an tonga, so a cultural mat, to show humility and respect and to acknowledge the wrong that has been done. So we know within the early moments of the apology that they've undertaken a culturally appropriate process for Pacific communities.
Does this apology feel like enough?
Well, the apology is deeply significant itself on a superficial level by actually having the government recognise that wrong was done by the government in the 1970s. However, because the Dawn Raids have had multiple intergenerational impacts and the legacy of the Dawn Raids exists within our broken immigration system, Pacific peoples are going to need more than just verbal presentation. There needs to be significant law reform, particularly within our immigration system, if we're going to see genuine remorse by the government.
Do Pacific Islanders in New Zealand still face discrimination, or are there impacts of historical inequalities that are still felt today?
Yes, unfortunately, the anti-Pacific racism, which was fostered by the government in the 1970s, persists today. There wasn't any anti-racist education or work done to undo the racism that the government fostered against Pacific peoples within New Zealand society. We see this within our immigration laws, where there is a lack of equitable pathways for Pacific peoples to gain permanent residency, and also other immigration programs which openly exploit Pacific labour for majority white gain.
So what can the government do, and what would Pacific Islanders like the government to do to improve things?
Well, let's hope that the government will acknowledge that the Dawn Raids weren't just a series of police raids, that it was a political campaign against Pacific peoples, which ingrained anti-Pacific sentiments within New Zealand, and therefore there's going to need to be a lot of work done to undo that. So one of the ways that they can show genuine remorse is through granting amnesty to all the Pacific migrants, and all migrants for that matter, migrants of colour, who are seeking amnesty from overstaying their visas and providing them with solid and equitable, accessible pathways to permanent residency.
OK, Dylan Asafo, University of Auckland Law School, thanks very much for joining us, really appreciate it.